I was trying to declutter my house before moving in a few months, so I decided to sell some old tools on Craigslist. They were still in good condition, but I had recently upgraded to battery-powered ones. I posted a listing for a power drill and tool set at $80, which I thought was a fair deal. Within an hour, I got 2 responses. One person tried lowballing me at $50, which I politely declined. The other was eager to buy at full price and wanted to pick them up that evening. We agreed to meet at 5 p.m. I never let buyers inside my house, preferring to meet in my driveway. It was a busy neighborhood, so I felt safe. But at 4:30, before our scheduled time, there was an unexpected knock at my door. Peeking through the window, I saw a man standing there, his red car parked in my driveway. He claimed to be the buyer and admitted he was early. I told him to wait in his car while I gathered the tools. He hesitated, making things a little awkward, but eventually walked back to his vehicle. When I met him outside, he tested the tools, seemingly satisfied. But then, holding the drill, he suddenly asked, "How about 20 bucks?" I was annoyed. He had already agreed to $80. I told him I could go a little lower, but not that low. Without another word, he put the drill down and walked back to his car, driving off without buying anything. Frustrated, I put the tools away and moved on with my night. But a couple of hours later, I spotted his red car parked down the street, a few houses away. It was empty, so I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence. An hour later, there was a knock at my door. I ignored it, but 30 seconds later, another knock. Then I heard his voice. "Hey, it's me. I changed my mind. I brought the money." I knew he was lying. That car had been parked down the street for a while. He'd been watching my house. I didn't respond. Instead, I called the police and gave them his name and vehicle description. He kept knocking, calling out that he wanted the tools. Then there was silence. A minute passed. Then another. Curious but cautious, I quietly approached the window by the door. Suddenly, a loud thud hit the side of my house, followed by rustling leaves and hurried footsteps. Looking out, I saw the man limping toward his car. Before he could escape, police arrived, blocking his path. He later admitted he had planned to rob me, but couldn't find a way inside. Turns out, he had tried climbing a tree to jump onto my roof, but missed, crashing into the side of my house and injuring his leg. Worse yet, he had a knife on him, and the window he was trying to reach, it was unlocked. If he had made that jump, he could have gotten inside. That was the last time I ever used Craigslist. Even now, I double-check every lock on my windows, especially the ones I used to think were unreachable. Years ago, I used Craigslist to find a room for rent. After searching for about a week, I found a listing that seemed perfect, a house outside of town, shared with a guy around my age named Aaron. He seemed friendly over the phone, and everything checked out. Excited to move in, I packed my things and drove 30 minutes to my new home. The house, however, was not what I expected. The listing mentioned it was an older home, but this place looked ancient, at least 100 years old. The interior pictures from Craigslist made it seem modern, so I assumed they had renovated it. When Aaron greeted me at the door and showed me around, my worries faded. The inside was completely different, clean, updated, and comfortable. I moved in that night. For the first few days, everything was normal. Aaron worked in town, so I had the house to myself most of the time. But one thing stood out. There was a locked door that he never mentioned that I assumed it was a basement, though he had never told me the house had one. I didn't ask. It wasn't my business. But something about it felt off. Then, things got weird. One night, Aaron brought home fast food, ate quickly, and went to bed early. I stayed up watching TV, eventually heading to bed myself. But as I lay there, struggling to sleep, I heard his bedroom door creak open. I listened, waiting for footsteps. Nothing. Then, after a couple of minutes, I heard slow, deliberate steps moving down the hall toward my door. They stopped. Silence. Then a soft thump against my door like he was pressing against it. He stayed there motionless. I barely breathed. Finally, he moved away, but instead of returning to his room, I heard another door open, the locked one. This became a pattern. Every night, he would leave his room, stop at my door, then disappear into the locked room. One night, I decided to confront him. As soon as he opened the basement door, I stepped into the hallway. "Hey, Aaron, everything okay?" He froze. His wide eyes stared at me, startled. I pressed on. "Why do you keep going in there every night?" For a moment, he just stood there silent. Then, as soon as I took a step toward him, he bolted, sprinting out the back door and vanishing into the woods. Terrified, I locked the doors, grabbed a kitchen knife, and stood before the open basement door. I hesitated. There was no light switch. The walls were old, decayed wood. It looked completely untouched, unlike the rest of the house. I debated whether to go down. Instead, I grabbed my bags, threw them in my car, and drove away without looking back. I never heard from Aaron again. Years later, curiosity got the better of me, and I looked up the house online. It had been demolished. An article mentioned it had been abandoned for months, ever since Aaron ran into the woods that night. The article also stated that the house was torn down due to criminal findings. It didn't say what those findings were. To this day, I wonder what was behind that locked door. 3 years ago, I had just moved into a rental house and needed a bigger TV for my living room. Since I was on a budget, I searched Craigslist and found an older flat screen for a good price. The seller, Mitch, responded the next morning. His email was oddly enthusiastic, almost too excited, but I chalked it up to him being an overly friendly guy. We agreed to meet at 6:30 p.m. the next day, and strangely, he even sent me a Google Calendar invite. I thought it was weird, but it didn't really matter. When I arrived at his house that evening, all the lights were on, but the front door was slightly ajar. I hesitated, but rang the doorbell. Instantly, I heard something drop inside the house, followed by silence. A bad feeling crept over me. Just as I decided to leave, footsteps approached. The door opened slightly wider, revealing a man. "Need something?" he asked, half hidden behind the door. Confused, I explained I was there for the TV. After a pause, he muttered, "All right," and let me in. Something felt off. This man wasn't acting like Mitch from the emails. He wasn't friendly. He was tense. The TV was right next to the door, so I quickly handed him the cash and prepared to grab it. Instead, he stuffed the money in his pocket, then suddenly shoved me backward, yelling, "Get out!" I didn't argue. I ran. After calling the police, I learned the truth. The man who attacked me wasn't Mitch. Mitch had been attacked just before I arrived by another Craigslist buyer who had come for a different item. The intruder had accepted Mitch's calendar invite, revealing his real name. He was arrested days later. And Mitch? He turned out to be the kind, happy old man I originally expected to meet.